Asking Vince McMahon to have a little bit of faith in his roster might be wishful thinking, though. This is the same man who, 6 years ago on his own network, told Steve Austin that the roster now is full of millennials who don't want it. They don't want it the way that you did, Steve. You and all those guys from the Attitude Era roster and all those people, they don't want it the way that you do. And whether you believe that or not is not even the point. This is what he thinks. I don't need to be in the creative meetings. I don't need to be in his inner circle to know where Vince McMahon's head is at. He said this in his own words. The roster is full of millennials. They don't want it. They don't have the passion for it the way that you did. So is it any wonder why he keeps taking his DeLorean back to the future? Can't do that anymore with The Undertaker. Or can he? Of course he can. He'd scrape his dead corpse off the floor if he needed a main event for one of his shows bad enough. So we already know what Vince McMahon thinks of the current roster. He does not think very highly of them, but for a few exceptions. But for a handful of people, he doesn't seem to care very much about his current roster. He sure as hell doesn't think much of the talent from NXT. But now we learn from PW Insider and The Observer and Fightful that a number of WWE talents, all of them big men, have been ordered to the Performance Center recently by Vince McMahon to work on refining and improving their in-ring skills. And that contingent includes Keith Lee, Otis, Dio Madden, who portrays Mace from Retribution. Another example of what Vince McMahon thinks of NXT talent. I give you Exhibit A with Retribution. Need I say more? Yabba Dabba Doo Guy from Raw Underground has also been ordered back to the PC, and AJ Styles' bodyguard, Omos. They have all been taking part in regular workouts at the PC on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And Meltzer said that Vince McMahon threw a fit about the working ability of some of these guys on the main roster, and he was especially angry about some of the big guys, which is what led to this. So now they're taking classes at the PC, led by Adam Pearce and Drew Gulak. According to Fightful, upon learning of this news, many WWE talents that they reached out to were said to be baffled at the inclusion of Keith Lee on that list. They also said there are a couple of things that have caught the attention of backstage officials in recent weeks regarding Otis's matches, specifically the idea that he could work safer in the ring. Keith Lee almost killed himself on a dive a few weeks ago on TV. I would not be surprised if that was the spot that Vince blew a gasket. You know my thoughts on the dives. Wait until I get to the AEW news here in a little bit. And the comments that Jim Ross made that upset a lot of the wrestlers in the back. But dives aside, I've never heard anybody, I've never seen anybody in interviews, other wrestlers who have praised Keith Lee and talked about him. Keith Lee just had, I think, a 24 special on the WWE Network. And even Vince in one of the scenes was in the back with him, putting him over. I've never heard or read or seen anybody question the in-ring ability of Keith Lee. Keith Lee was signed to a contract because they liked what he brought to the table. He was pushed in NXT and he was made a double champion because the man is a star. And if this proves nothing else, it proves that Vince McMahon does not spend 1 second of his time paying any attention to what is happening in NXT. And it explains so much about why these NXT talents have such a difficult time when they hit the main roster. Why they build up this personality and this profile and this career for themselves in NXT, only for it to be changed and manipulated and ruined in many cases once they hit the main roster. Because Vince McMahon, it's as if he is seeing these people for the very first time. The idea that I am sitting here right now talking about Keith Lee being sent back to the PC for training, after all of the times you have heard me talk about Nia Jax needs to go back to the Performance Center. If there's ever an example of somebody who was called up way too soon and could have benefited from spending another year or however much time down, at the time, I thought the whole idea was that it was supposed to be developmental. That was the original idea anyway about NXT and the Performance Center. If anybody could have benefited from spending more time down there, it was Nia Jax. Someone like that would benefit from being sent back down for refinement and training. And yet here I am sitting talking about Keith Lee being among the names sent back for refinement and training. The fact that I am doing that is a disgrace. Now, if Keith Lee was sent to the Performance Center to assist with those other names, that would be different. I mean, part of me wants to give them the benefit of the doubt here, but I can't. I've been burned too many times by doing that. That would make more sense. Daba Kato and Omos, they're still very inexperienced, so I'm sure they could benefit from something like this. This is not an entirely horrible idea when you look at some of the names on that list. If Keith Lee was there to be another big man that they could spar with and they can learn from, that I could look at and say, you know what, that makes sense. But the way these reports are worded, you would think that they were sending him back to wrestling school. Shane Helms was one of the backstage producers who was furloughed earlier this year by WWE. He was recently brought back, and he tweeted this. He said, players that make it to the NBA, the NHL, the NFL don't stop practicing and drilling just because they made it to the top. Being signed to a major promotion does not mean that you stop trying to perfect your craft. That is when you work even harder to perfect your craft. Not that he's wrong. You should always try to improve and better yourself at whatever it is that you do. But he has to know that the people who are hearing this news, and the reason people are so upset, they're upset about a name like Keith Lee being included on that list. And the fact that he would tweet that comes across as a dig at Keith Lee. So either there's something about Keith Lee that I'm just not seeing when I watch him on TV, or these people are out of their fucking minds. But if Vince McMahon thinks that all these new guys don't know how to work, and he puts them on TV before realizing this, you know what? Maybe do a better job of paying attention to your own product. Some random Raw thoughts from Monday night. Matt Riddle. You see what they've been doing with Matt Riddle on the show. They're using him for comedy. Bro this and bro that. This week it was bro nuts. He walked around, and that's not some kind of new jockstrap he invented. It's his version of donuts. He calls them bro nuts. He walked around with a box of bro nuts, offering them to different people. He approached Jeff Hardy before Jeff Hardy's match with Bobby Lashley. He was offering him some bro nuts. He had a great idea. He thought that the Hardy Boys are one of the greatest tag teams of all time. But if the two of them teamed together, and it's funny too because he fucked it all up. He actually gave the punchline before he could set it up. He was supposed to mention the Hardy Bros was like the big punchline, and he blew it too early, and Jeff kind of laughed. But yes, that was the payoff to this segment here. You and I, man, we could be the Hardy Bros. And Jeff Hardy seemed amused. He said, look, I got a match. I got to get out of here. And it was Lashley and Jeff Hardy. Lashley ended up getting the win with the Hurt Lock. Riddle did come down in the middle of the match when MVP was getting involved, so Riddle was down there. So obviously they're going to do something with Riddle and with Jeff Hardy. Now there is a report that Vince McMahon likes Matt Riddle. He doesn't know why he does the bro thing so much. He doesn't really get him. He doesn't get Matt Riddle. There's a lot of things Vince McMahon doesn't get, but he doesn't get Matt Riddle. But he is amused by him. He likes him. He's amused by him. And he's like his little pet clown, I guess. And so he wants to make sure that he is on television, which is good for Riddle, I guess, right? It gets him TV time. At least Vince McMahon wants him on TV. I think that and apparently the other part of this is that he doesn't view him as being a main event star, but he views him as somebody on the card who could just be there to entertain and be, they could plug him in on the show wherever they need him. I disagree in that I think he can be a main event star. Not right now, but he could be a main event star one day. And I think he is somebody who is actually hurt. And I think a lot of guys on the roster are hurt. And this may be part of the reason why a lot of this stuff is going on. We see Vince McMahon is throwing a fit. This guy is not getting over, and this guy doesn't know how to work, and this and that. And Matt Riddle is a victim of this too. And that is the fact that we are living in a time, as we have for most of this year, where there are no fans in attendance at these shows. And I guarantee you That there are people right now who this company is looking at and saying it's not working, they're not getting over, and now they're not being pushed. Where if we had people in the audiences and people in the crowds, there are people who would be over and would be getting a push, and their career would look very different. So there are people actively being hurt by the fact that there are no audiences, and the only thing that these people have to go on, the only thing that Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard and Kevin Dunn and all these people have to go on is their gut. And think about how scary that is. They can only go on their gut because they're sweetening the crowd. They got their fake crowd piped in noise and chants and stuff. So you don't have any crowd, genuine crowd reactions. They're just going on who they think is over and who they think is not over. And I said this was going to be a problem from the very beginning, and there's not a whole lot you can do about that until the pandemic is to a point where it's safe enough to get crowds of people back together. That is not WWE's fault, but I said this is what was going to end up happening here. They must be in seventh heaven right now because they can manipulate and control the crowd any which way they want, and they're the judge, jury, and executioner of who's getting over and who's not. Their whole business is built on the idea that you listen to the fans. You go on the road, you go to the buildings, you listen, you watch, you see how the fans are reacting to different people. Are they sitting on their hands? Are they cheering? Are they putting signs together? Are they hijacking the show for this person or that person like they did with Daniel Bryan a few years ago? And you have none of that now. All they have to go on is who they think is over. And that is a dangerous, dangerous thing. And I think Matt Riddle is one of the people who would be over, who would be getting a positive reception from the audience, and who is not. And so they only view him, I think, as being at a certain level. But I think the Hardy Bros thing, look, I'm not the biggest fan of these makeshift tag teams and taking two singles guys and just fusing them together. I think the Hardy Bros I'll say this much, I think it would work a lot better if they didn't take his first name away from him. Then you would have Matt and Jeff, the Hardy Bros. So give the man his name back. And then the Hardy Bros thing works even better.